All right, hope everyone's doing well. If you got any questions about leadership in marriage, then just drop them in the comments. And you can also click on the link in the comments too if you want to join via audio. Your video won't show, and then we can have a conversation. So I had a question before this that was interesting, and it was from someone asking about what to do with their son to help them grow into a man. They were worried that they didn't want to invalidate the boy's emotions, but they also wanted the boy to be under control emotionally. They're worried at age 10 that he was crying a lot. Now, first question I would have about that is, why is he crying? Over what kinds of things? Find out what the patterns are and ask him what's going on, because it might be that the thing he's crying about isn't what you can immediately see. Perhaps there's something going on behind the scenes. Maybe he's being bullied at school, for example. So ask questions, find out what it is. If it turns out that he's crying because of something like restricted access to sweets or gaming or TV, then you might want to invalidate those feelings in the sense that, yes, you recognize they're real and he's frustrated, but those aren't actually good feelings to have. So talk about the fact that dependence on things to the extent that he cries if they're taken away from him isn't good for him as he's developing. And then maybe put some restrictions in place so that he gets used to not having those things. Because one of the most important things you can do for a boy when helping him develop into a man is to actually instill that spirit of self-denial and self-control. So let's say he's getting addicted to gaming. It's okay to game for a bit, can develop all kinds of good skills and be good fun. But do you really want to be the sort of person who cries and has a meltdown when he can't do it? Talk to him about that. So without knowing more about exactly what he's crying for, it's hard to give a more detailed answer, but that would be my general approach. Ask questions, find out what the root of the sadness is. Who knows what it might be? Maybe there are other factors that you don't realize. Discover those. But if it's clear to you that whenever you say he can't have XYZ, he cries, try to weaken that attachment to that thing. All right. Any other questions, drop them into the comments. I'll get to them as we go. And if you want to call in to talk, click on the link and we can do it that way too. So when we're thinking about leadership in marriage, all we are basically looking at is influence. That's all leadership is. How to be a stronger influence on your wife and on your kids too. I see a lot of people who scratch their heads about what patriarchy is, what it means to be a leader. Really, it comes down to that influence. And what some guys find to their frustration is that actually the strongest influence on their wives isn't actually themselves. Instead, it's someone else in the family, like a mother-in-law, or it could be a friend of the wife, or it might even just be the culture at large. So there's always going to be influence. There will always be leadership. And patriarchy is really making sure that you, as the leader of the family, are the main influence, the main leader. So we got a question here. How to choose a good wife that will help me become successful? Well, first up, what do you mean by successful? Let me know, and then we can talk a bit more about that. For some people, that would just mean that you want a wife who's going to help you to maximize your income. That's how secular people would generally define success, just measure it by money. Is that what you mean? How do you understand success? What sort of success are you looking your wife to bring to you? If it's more moral success, how can she help you become a better person? How can she help you to grow in virtue and holiness? That's very different from just looking for someone who's going to push you hard to increase your income. It's not necessarily the same thing. So tell me what you're thinking of when you imagine success, and then we can get back to that question. Can you delve into the difference between leadership and tyranny? Well, the way that Aquinas explains that is that a tyrant gives orders for his benefit, whereas a virtuous leader, like a husband or a father, for example, gives orders for the benefit of the people that he is leading. So a tyrant orders people around for his own benefit, his own convenience, and it might actually be to their detriment. Whereas a leader, like a husband or a father, exercises his authority for the benefit of the people that he rules. So, this is a great reframe for patriarchy, isn't it? And explains why it's not tyranny. You want to be leading your wife, leading your kids for their benefit. That's really what the authority delegated to the husband as the head of the family from God is for. It's not for yourself. And some people feel nervous about this idea of leadership because they have in the back of their minds that it's just tyranny, because they feel like they're doing it for selfish reasons. But actually, that's not the way to think of it at all. You're doing it because it's good for your wife, it's good for your kids. And I'm sure you can think of all kinds of reasons why that would be the case. So people need boundaries. Any society needs to have a leader. If you are a CEO of a company, or even if you're a teacher in the classroom, the authority that you're exercising is trying to make the people that you're managing bring out the best in themselves. Almost like a captain in a sports team. Same idea. So returning to that question from earlier, how to choose a good wife that will help me become successful? Yes, financial success, building great wealth. Well, this is a Christian channel, Catholic channel, so I would question whether your main motivation in choosing a wife should be financial success and building great wealth. What does it profit a man if he gains the whole world and loses his own soul? So you've got to ask yourself, why is that your top criterion for choosing a wife? Someone who can help you build great wealth. Now, you could be a criminal or a gangster and choose a wife by that criteria. But it doesn't mean that it's a good marriage. It doesn't mean that it's someone that you should look to as a wife. Really, what you're looking for in a wife is someone to help you grow in virtue, someone who's going to be a good mother as well. And it might not be the same thing. If you want to build great wealth, you might even say, do it with 2 incomes and no kids. But that's not what marriage is about. So I think your assumptions there are slightly confused, and you need to think more about what you mean by success. I would disagree that success is primarily financial success. How to prevent little conflicts between spouses because of tiredness or stress. All right, first thing to do here is be charitable. Think about your own reactions to those actions from your spouse. Let's say that your first thought is, oh, what she just said or did was so disrespectful. And then you feel that pride welling up in you that you didn't deserve to be treated like that. Maybe you get angry. Maybe you have a short or curt response. Instead, check that in yourself and think, that wasn't perhaps just a moment of intentional disrespect. Instead, I can see that she's tired. I can see that she's stressed. I can factor in those circumstances to take that remark or that moment in a different way and not get so angry about it. So remind yourself that it's the tiredness and the stress that's the main thing going on here. Okay, after you've done that, the next thing would be, how has it built up to this point? What's happened over the last few weeks, days, sometimes hours, that's pushed my spouse to the point where she's got snappy or irritable? Then the next question would be, what should I have done to intervene earlier? How can I learn from experience and these patterns about why we end up in this situation? So instead of seeing yourself as a victim of her behavior in that moment, take ownership of it. See how you have contributed to it. Now, obviously, you also want to let her know that it's not a good idea for your marriage for you two to be speaking to each other in a disrespectful way. So you can explain that this isn't something that you think is healthy, and you can talk about it with her afterwards when you both calm down. If this is a bad moment where you're both too tired or too stressed to talk sensibly. But remember, stay charitable and try to empathize, first of all, with what might have made her act like that. And don't take it too personally. Hope that helps. How do you establish a solid prayer life with a woman that is lukewarm in her faith? Well, what do you mean by a solid prayer life? I don't know what denomination you are. In the Catholic Church, you fulfill your obligations for prayer just by attending Mass weekly and concentrating properly during it. That's the bare minimum. Now, let's say you have a really extreme idea of how often and also how long you should be praying for. It might just be unreasonable. I don't know what your expectation is of what a solid prayer life constitutes, but think hard about it. Where did you get it from? Oftentimes, less is more. Start small, be consistent. The other thing is, why is she lukewarm in her faith? That probably is the root problem. Before you worry about getting her to pray more, dig down into the deeper question. Why is she lukewarm? Perhaps she hasn't been catechized properly. Or perhaps she just needs to get to know you better and your reasons for taking faith more seriously so that you can influence her in that sense. But it's hard to give more advice on this without knowing what you are expecting there. What are some good common criteria for good boundaries when trying to be a leader for the family? Most guys who talk about boundaries, in my experience, tend to be too harsh, just in general. Like, an obsession with boundaries isn't normally a healthy way to go about marriage. You need them, but the main emphasis should be on friendship, because your wife's supposed to be your best friend. And if you are focusing on friendship and connection, and most of your interactions are to do with praise and positivity, then you don't need to worry too much about boundaries. And when you do, then you can just frame it as, well, I'm saying no to disrespect, because really I'm saying yes to us getting along together. Like, I believe that we are one flesh, because that's what marriage is, and that we want to have a thriving marriage, and that automatically sets your boundaries for you. So you're not going to be sarcastic with each other. You won't make snide remarks. If you're upset about something, you will talk to each other about it, and you look into see her perspective whenever you can, and assume that she's not an idiot, because you didn't marry an idiot. So that even when it might seem like she's wrong, she's probably right in some way. So you're going to dig down and ask questions about that. But just in general, I find that a lot of guys who are struggling in marriage emphasizing boundaries too heavily and not really thinking about the yes. Like, they have all these things they want to say no to, but what yes is it grounded in? Get her excited about that yes, and that will do most of the hard work for you. All right. Now, next thing. What does it look like to strike the proper balance between nurturing your wife by lifting her burdens and keep her from avoiding sloth by asking more of her? Well, that's an interesting question, because sloth, strictly speaking, is actually to do with like a laziness in pursuit of our spiritual good. I think what you mean here is just what people would describe as laziness around the house. I'm guessing that's right. Let me know in the comments if I got that wrong. So sloth is specifically to do with a reluctance to pursue our spiritual good in the way that we should, whereas laziness is just a general sense of not doing what you're supposed to do. So what you're asking there is basically, what are the duties of a husband? What are the duties of a wife? And most people asking that question are really thinking about the division of labor in the household. And there actually isn't a strict set of what each person should be doing in church teaching. In fact, Aquinas, for example, would say that everything in the household is ultimately the husband's responsibility, okay? You can delegate things to your wife, but really what you want to do is just talk with her about what's going to work best and who should do what based on what time you have available and what your different capabilities are. But as long as you assume that ultimately it's all your responsibility, then you're going to have the right mindset for it. Is it possible to overload your wife with different responsibilities so she gets exhausted and can't cope? Yes, definitely, that happens quite often actually. Is it also possible to have a reasonable expectation that you've agreed with your wife for what she should be doing, and she doesn't actually do it, and you need to have some conversations about why that is, whether she needs some more support? Yeah, it is. But you're not going to find some kind of cookie cutter list of who should be doing what. For example, some guys think that like disciplining the kids is supposed to be mainly the wife's role, and all they have to do is earn money and that's it. Then they come home and just put their feet up and nothing else. Well, not really, because Catechism of Trent says that it's the husband's duty to keep his family in order. So you have to be involved in that. And yet it also says that it's the wife's duty to help to train the children in virtue. So, and this shouldn't be a surprise, it means that you're both working together as a team for the benefit of the family. And that might look different according to the personalities, the strengths, the weaknesses of each pair of husband and wife from household to household. So a big mistake is thinking that there's this one blueprint about how it's supposed to be. I'm just going to see if I can get the better mic connected to this laptop. How can you come to know God's will for your life? Well, that's a very difficult question. Some people would say that it's going to take a lifetime for you to figure out. You'd need to really focus on getting to know your priest well and discussing things with him in confession. You can rule out the idea that you have some kind of particular vocation as regards a profession. That's not church teaching. So you're either called to be priest or called to be married, or you might also be called to be a monk. So those are like the broad vocations, and everyone's going to fit into one of those. But in terms of what job you should do, well, that doesn't actually matter too much. You can think about what your strengths and weaknesses are, and then trust that Providence has a plan for you. If you're going to work hard, God will work with you. But there isn't teaching that you have to be a doctor, for example. You have to work in tech, or you have to be a lawyer. Best thing to do is just focus on keeping the teachings and precepts of the church and doing your duties for your station in life. So that means being a good husband, being a good father. Yes, that's going to involve providing, and you can pray as well. You can seek counsel. That's part of prudence. But I find most people asking this question are wondering what they should do for a living, or what kind of goal they're supposed to have in a material or worldly sense. And that shouldn't really be the emphasis. In fact, we're told not to worry too much about the future, not to be too anxious about that. Take each day as it comes, do your duties well, let those days stack up, and you'll build a good life. cool shirt. Yeah, I don't know if you can see, but it's actually got Our Lady on the front. So it's really nice for that reason too. And it's nice material for the summer. And I've got my summer haircut too, so it's a bit more comfortable. How do you distinguish between poor leadership and poor followership? Meaning, if a husband is a great leader, but his wife refuses to follow his lead or fails to uphold her duty, how do you fix it? Well, you have experience of that as a poor follower yourself. We all do, because we follow Christ's leadership. Patriarchy goes up the chain. So think of it in yourself, first of all. You know that you fall short as a follower in all kinds of ways. You know what you're expected to do. And in fact, we are called to be perfect by Christ. He knows that we can't do it ourselves, but he's going to help us get there. Think about when you fail as a follower. Think about the 4 wounds of original sin: weakness, ignorance, concupiscence, and malice. And if you do notice that your wife has failed in some duty, then you know to look to those rather than take it too personally, first of all. So weakness of will, for example, knowing the right thing to do, but not actually getting it done. You know that's there in human nature. You feel it in yourself too. So first thing I would suggest is patience, right? Patience and persistence and support to help people to grow. Recognizing as well that your defects can be the occasion of your wife's spiritual growth, and her defects can also be the occasion of your spiritual growth too. God is going to use your strengths and weaknesses together, the two of you, to help make both of you saints. So something you might feel really frustrated about could actually be something that you need as a struggle to be able to grow as a man. So that can be quite a useful reframe for marriage troubles. The other thing in your question is, if a husband is a great leader, but his wife refuses to follow his lead, is pretty interesting. If he really is a great leader, and he is inspiring, and he is influential, and he's making his wife's life better through the influence he's having on her, why is it that she's refusing to follow his lead? Especially when you have the grace from the sacrament of marriage and the fact that women are made for men. Scripture makes this super clear. It's controversial, but that's because most people are so brainwashed by feminism now. Man is the glory of God. Woman is the glory of man. St. Paul says that the man was not made for the woman, but the woman for the man. So just by natural law, she's looking for the male leadership. Now, you might not like this, but in my experience helping guys in their marriages, a lot of the times when they're feeling really frustrated and thinking, I'm just such a great leader, it's all her. If only she would change, things would be great. Actually, they need to focus on themselves more, because there are things they are doing as leaders that are leading to conflict, frustration, or they have unreasonable expectations. And that's really the thing they need to focus on most. You actually empower yourself by focusing on yourself. You emasculate yourself by playing this victim narrative of you being the perfect leader and it all being your wife's fault. So that's just a general tip for that. Is it possible that you can be a good leader and your wife can also have moments of weakness? Yeah. And part of being a good leader involves understanding that because of the weakness of human nature, and also being forgiving and not getting discouraged. How to deal with parents-in-law who disrespect our marriage lifestyle and don't agree with our parenting. Husband wants to go no contact with them. I wouldn't recommend going no contact with anyone. If someone goes no contact on you, right, if they fall on their side, that's okay. And they might have done you a favor because they could and your family. And just by standing for truth, you have made them remove themselves from your life. But in general, I don't think you should be the one to cut contact. Let it happen. That's fine. Don't compromise on what you believe in. But in general, you want to try to show people what a good life looks like. And if they don't want to see that, that's their problem. Now, I don't know what they disrespect about your marriage or lifestyle. I'm assuming they don't like the fact that you are a Christian, in which case you can talk to them about their beliefs. Maybe they have some mistaken assumptions about what you believe. That's very often the case. I think it was Chesterton said that very few people hate the Catholic Church. They just hate what they imagine her to be. So have some conversations and find out what the root of their disapproval is, what the root of their disrespect is, and then see where you can go from there. But without those conversations, you probably won't get anywhere good. How about God's will regarding vocation like marriage or priesthood? Well, talk to your own priest about that and his experience of discerning that. That's also a matter for prayer too. Again, you're not going to find some quick and easy way of deciding whether you are called to be a priest. Most people wondering about this need to develop much stronger relationships with their own priests in the first instance, rather than hopping online and Googling what the answer might be, or just talking to influencers. That's something that's going to unfold largely within your own parish and your own prayer life. Okay, I think we've got through all the questions so far. If you've got any others, drop them into the chat for me now. And if anybody else wants to click on the link to join and discuss on the mic, that's fine too. Otherwise, it's been good to talk to you. We've covered some interesting questions today. Nate says that he did mean laziness, not sloth. Yeah, most people, when they use the word sloth, what they really mean is laziness. Sloth's actually a lot more dangerous than laziness, obviously, because spiritual goals are more important. They matter more than just our physical or day-to-day material ones. All right, guys, good to speak to you. We got through all the questions today, and let's do it again, same time next week. Take care.